The religious right were a large organisation during the 1980s and late 1970s. They were a large group of right-wing voters who'd mobilised during the 70s to oppose social changes that had occurred since the 1960s. They were displeased with the Supreme Court, despite the fact that the court did appear to be becoming more conservative. They were disappointed with the federal government, although at times they were pleased with them, especially when President Reagan encouraged Congress to fund chastity clinics, and with many Supreme Court decisions that hindered abortion. They were opposed to gay people. However, many other groups, including televangelists and Concerned Women for America, were also opposed to them. They campaigned against abortion, and this was the most successful of all of their campaigns. It made it harder for people to get abortions in the United States. They believed that America had a huge drug problem, since drug use had tripled since the 70s, and around 40 million Americans used illegal substances. In response, First Lady Nancy Reagan launched her Just Say No campaign to steer teenagers away from drugs. This was followed by the 1988 Drug-Free Workplace Act, which is pretty self-explanatory. The religious right failed with homosexuality, traditional family values, and drugs to fend off the challenges to the social conformity that they desired. However, they did succeed in generating culture wars that exacerbated political divisions.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out places, worn out faces, bright and early for their daily race.
Reaganomics was the belief in supply-side economics, which emphasised economic growth through low taxation and less government regulation. Reagan aimed to cut taxes, reduce the size and role of federal government, cut public spending and minimise welfare state arrangements where possible. 212 federal programmes had their budget reduced. These programmes included food stamps, student loans and child nutrition programmes. The reduction in these schemes' budgets mainly affected the poor. So who was affected and how? The rich. Cut in taxes, they got more money, so the rich got richer. A cut in welfare budget. Again, the rich got richer. The poor. Cuts in taxes meant the poor got poorer as less money was coming their way. A cut in welfare budget, schemes to help the poor were attacked, meaning that the poor got poorer. Again, he opposed a minimum wage, so the poor got poorer, and the wage gap furthered. No strike for federal employees clause in contracts was also introduced by Reagan, and this meant that the poor were unable to protest against low wages without facing punishment. Business owners, they opposed a minimum wage and got richer. No strike for federal employees clause in contracts, less working days lost, and they got more money. The elderly, cuts in taxes meant that more money in retirement. Cuts in welfare budget, schemes to help the elderly were also affected. Unions, they got annoyed by the minimum wage and the no strike for federal employees clause. And the unemployed, cuts in welfare budget meant that there was less money to help them get on their feet.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out places, worn out faces.
So did the status of women improve by 1992? Well, then yes and no. Their economic status was rising, and the Now campaigned for equal pay and job opportunities. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission stated that sexual harassment was a form of sex discrimination, but sexual harassment cases increased. O'Connor was the first female Supreme Court Justice, and Ford was appointed the first female member of Cabinet. Clarence Thomas revitalised women campaigners who had been relatively quiet. Unprecedented numbers of women stood for local, state, and national office in 1992, and as a result, the number of women elected doubled. In 1993, there were 47 out of 435 members who were women. Women working allowed them to achieve their potential. In 1992, there was the Child Support Recovery Act, which ensured delinquent fathers paid child support. So let's look at the flip side. They were still inferior to males. They held less important roles than males. Despite gaining abortion rights, many Supreme Court rulings reversed progress. Geraldine Ferraro ran for president. She was good, but faced a lot of sexist abuse, highlighting how far women still needed to go. They were still underrepresented and were opposed by the religious right. Did the status of black Americans improve by 1992? To some extent. Reagan appointed the first black cabinet member, and NAACP lawyers won hundreds of cases that led to changes to congressional districts and voting systems that assisted the election of thousands of black officials by the 1990s. Black congressmen up from 45 in 1990 to 69 in 1992. Black mayors are on the rise, and affirmative action helped increase numbers of ethnic minorities in college. In 1983, only 38% of blacks joined university, but in 1992, this was 51.2%. Income rose by 20% from 1981 to 92. Affirmative action increased the economic status of ethnic minorities as it increased their employability. Integrated housing, schools and marriages were very high in the 90s. White Americans admired and enjoyed watching black artists and athletes. The Oprah Winfrey Show was very popular, and Michael Jackson was also very popular. 19 of the top 50 albums in 1985 were by black artists. Jordan got lots of money. $21 million from endorsements alone, and he was also famous. Glory Foods became very popular as well. Jerry Rubin helped found the Yippies, joined Black Power, and participated in anti-war protests. In 1980, he became a Wall Street stockbroker and established the business and networking salon. In 1988, Jesse Jackson made a serious run for the Democratic nomination for presidency. However, he was a frontrunner. However, he trailed back after anti-Semitic statements came to light. So let's move on to the no's. Black Americans rarely won statewide elections. White people did not want to be represented by black Americans. Police brutality was common, and they often got away with it. Disproportionate number of black males were in jails, and they were poorer than white citizens. 30% lived in poverty between 1970 and 1990. Unemployment was high, and affirmative action programs were limited by the Supreme Court in City of Richmond versus Croson Company. 1990 Civil Rights Bill vetoed by Bush as he feared it would lead to multiple lawsuits and force businesses to set radical hiring quotas. Many still lived in ghettos with poorly funded schools. Continued campaigning against integration demonstrated that black people's social status remained inferior. Southern schools became slowly resegregated after 1980.
All around me are familiar.
So, how are Hispanics affected? Hispanic American organizations became more effective in their... Reagan appointed the first Hispanic cabinet member in 1989, and the number of Hispanics in the House of Representatives rose from 5 in 1970 to 10 in 1980 and 17 in 1992. The number of Native Americans with a college education increased by 1/3. Income rose from $10,500 a year in 1975 to $16,600 in 1981. But they also faced police brutality and consisted of only 5% of drivers on some roads, but 70% of those pulled over. They were poorer than white citizens. Oh shit. So how were Native Americans affected until 1992? Well, they were positively affected in the fact that Duro versus Reader 1990, the Supreme Court ruled that tribal courts did not have criminal jurisdiction over someone who was not a member of that tribe. They were showed full tribal sovereignty in that respect. Additionally, the Native American Grave Protection and Repatriation Act, 1990, enabled Native Americans to retrieve remains of their ancestors from museums and universities, which was obviously a good thing. But on the other hand, they were negatively affected in the fact that the Supreme Court supported the Native American tribal sovereignty and tax powers in Marion, 1980. They remain caught between their cultural traditions and the dominant legal system, and the fact that they were poorer than white citizens.
Dead. Straight out of Compton, crazy motherfucker named Ice Cube. From the gang called niggas with attitudes. When I'm called off, I got a sawed off. Squeeze the trigger and bodies are hauled off. You too, boy, if you fuck with me. The police are gonna have to come and get me off your ass. That's how I'm going out. For the punk motherfuckers that's showing out. Niggas start to mumble, they wanna rumble. Makes a man cook them in a pot like gumbo. Going off on the motherfucker like that. With a gat that's pointed at your ass. So give it up smooth. Ain't no telling when I'm down for a jack move. Here's a murder rap to keep ya dancing. With a crime record like Charles Manson. AK-47 is a tool. Don't make me act a motherfucking fool. Me and you can go toe to toe, no mate. I'm knocking niggas out the box daily. Yo, weekly, monthly, and yearly. Until them dumb motherfuckers see clearly.
Cultural challenge. Young white males. Young white males challenge conservative views of sexual and social freedom. An example of this includes the MTV Headbangers Ball. Gang culture. Young black males. There was a disproportionate number of black Americans in jail. This represented a general divide between the older black community and the younger black community. Ice Cube often had sexist lyrics in his songs, and NWA, from Compton, LA, had popular music, such as Fuck the Police and Straight Outta Compton, which had lyrics such as I'm a bad motherfucker, and you know this, but the pussy-ass niggas won't show this. PMRC, Parents Music Resource Centre. They had concerns that song lyrics were sexually explicit, violent, or glorifying drugs and alcohol. Jello Biafra, leader of Dead Kennedys, was arrested in 1986 for distributing harmful material to a minor. A young LA girl bought the group's Frankenchrist album, which had a poster of 10 penises. Non-oppositional youth culture. This followed a more traditional route. They were not interested in new popular culture and preferred sports. Examples of this include yuppies, young, upwardly mobile urban professionals, and young gay men. These fought for equal status in society and for AIDS to be seen as a serious threat and not just a gay virus. 46,000 people died from AIDS by 1989, and many called it the gay plague. 1987, the newly established ACT UP, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, followed up the first gay pride parade in NYC with a demonstration that demanded equal rights and more research into AIDS. Until Ryan White Care Act of 1990, which granted $220 to help victims, little was done to help AIDS sufferers.
Cheers for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Sorry from myself, Morgan Burrows, Lewis Day, and of course Samuel Byford for wasting 20 minutes of your life. So many thanks. I don't need to clean it up for this shit. Can't see it. It's not very American, is it?
Start from the beginning.
Okay. All creatures. Small. And rise like a phoenix.
Begin. Wait, no.
Oh, Kitty. What am I doing? Maybe affected the poor. So, how would... Who...
You idiot. Charles reached for his oral stage.
Damn.
God bless thee, man. Gentlemen.
Okay.
Next one?
What's this one?
That's the
The actual outro.